passengers are sitting in port right now, thousands of miles from home, waiting for flights that may not exist for days because their cruise line just canceled every remaining sailing for the season. And here's the part that's gonna bother you. There's a clause buried in most travel insurance policies that means that they might be paying for this mess themselves. Plus, one cruise line is now telling guests to stop putting a certain something on the balcony, and the fact that this is required an official announcement tells you everything. Hi, I'm Melissa, a university professor who loves to cruise and who loves to talk ship. Now, if you had a cruise booked out of Dubai this month, I've been to Dubai, lovely country. It wasn't at all what I thought, and I mean that in the most positive of ways, but it's not the place to cruise right now because the past week obviously has been brutal. MSC Cruise Lines has an itinerary. They sail regularly out of Dubai, which is their 7-night Arabian Gulf itineraries. And they pulled back into port on February 27th after finishing its most recent sailing, and then the ship was told to stay put. The next departure didn't happen at all, and then the one after that obviously was canceled because of all the stuff that's happening over there. And then MSC made the call that nobody wanted. The entire remaining winter cruise program out of Dubai is now gone poof kaput. 3 more sailings scheduled for March 14th, 21st, and 28th, all wiped off the books. MSC is offering full refunds on the cruise fare for those canceled sailings, and that's obviously the right move, the right thing to do, but the refund here is only part of the story. Passengers who were already in Dubai for their next sailing or still on the ship from a previous one, they gotta get home. And MSC says they're now working with airlines in the region to figure out how to get guests on various return flights, since obviously the conflict in the Middle East is causing all kinds of disruptions and cancellations. But those carriers have said that flights are running at near full capacity right now as everybody's trying to flee, and some passengers have been told it could be 3 to 4 days before a seat even opens up. Now, you've got cruisers who flew halfway around the world for a vacation that no longer exists, stuck in one of the most expensive cities in the world that's in the middle of conflict, just having to twiddle their thumbs and wait. Now, MSC is also exploring charter flights and coordinating with diplomatic officials for passengers dealing with visa complications, which does tell you how far beyond a normal cruise cancellation this whole situation has gone. And again, this is an unusual situation. We're talking about acts of war here, but when you need diplomats involved to help your passengers get home, that's a different kind of problem. But it's not just MSC cruisers that are impacted. Other cruise lines have also pulled back from the Arabian Gulf, and multiple itineraries across the region have been affected. So this is not just an MSC situation. So if you're booked on any Arabian Gulf sailing over the next few months, obviously it's probably not gonna happen. And don't just sit around and wait for an email. Don't wait for the cruise line. Don't assume that no news is good news. And in fact, I personally wouldn't feel comfortable taking any cruise out of there anytime soon. But here's the important part that I want every cruiser to hear. Now, I'm a big proponent of travel insurance. I just made a video about this last week. I talk about it a lot. I've had an annual insurance plan that's covered my butt more times than I can count. But here's the thing you gotta know. Most standard travel insurance policies include a specific exclusion for what they call acts of war or even civil unrest. So if your insurer classifies what's happening in the region, which obviously would be arguably an act of war, as either of these categories, your claim gets denied. Not reduced, not negotiated, like flat out denied. The cruise line refunds your fare, which MSC is doing in this case, and that's more than fair. But you're out a lot of other things, your round trip flights, your hotel nights, all of these other costs that you incur when you're trying to travel. That is gonna come out of your pocket. So think about what this looks like. And again, Dubai, beautiful place, probably one of the cleanest cities I've ever been in, but it's expensive. And if your cruise just got canceled, you're on the phone trying to find a flight home. Every price is jacked up by a huge magnitude. Hotel prices are through the roof in a city that's already really expensive. Meals are expensive. Everything is expensive. So for a couple, even just 2 people, you're looking at potentially thousands of dollars in unplanned expenses, and your standard travel insurance policy is probably gonna tell you, hey, not our problem. That's not vacation money anymore. That's a financial emergency on top of the vacation that you already lost. And this isn't unique to the Middle East. Any region where geopolitical tensions could escalate. And honestly, unfortunately, the world we live in, that list just keeps getting longer every year, especially right now with all the stuff that's popping off in the Middle East, carries the same insurance risk. Your cruise fare might be refundable, yeah, but everything around it, every dollar you spend getting there, getting home, all that stuff, it might not be. And that gap between what you think you're covered for and what you're actually covered for is where people get pounded financially. So here's what I want you to do before you take your next cruise, especially if you're booking somewhere with even a hint, even a whiff of geopolitical complexity. Open up your travel insurance policy and search for 3 specific phases: acts of war, civil unrest, and government travel advisory. Read and know what's actually excluded. I am a big fan of Allianz annual plans. That's what I encourage, that's what I carry, but a lot of these are included that they exclude acts of war. Now, there are some travel plans, even through Allianz, that don't have these exclusions, but if you're traveling anywhere that might have any issues whatsoever, make sure that you're covered and make sure that your plan specifically does not have these exclusions. And you have a policy that specifically covers political disruption. So again, they do exist, they're gonna cost you more, more. But if you're taking a trip in anywhere like this, you gotta make sure you're covered. In other cruise news, Carnival's John Heald, one of my favorite people in the cruise world, went public this week for something that a lot of cruisers, they have no idea to even exist. Now, if you've ever lost a loved one, they love to cruise or they just love the ocean, did you know you can actually, in most cases, scatter their ashes at sea? I have a friend who lost her husband. He was in his early 40s. It was very traumatic. And she actually took one of her first Royal Caribbean cruises and she did this scattering the ashes at sea thing. And it was really lovely. Royal Caribbean handled it beautifully for her and her son. So it is an option with most of the mainstream cruise lines. Now with Carnival and many of these other lines, they will arrange a ceremony for you on board. This ceremony is completely free of charge. You set it up in advance. And the cruise lines, they all do have their own specific policies. With my friend, she had to have a copy of the death certificate. She had to use a specific biodegradable container for the cremains, and they actually cordon off a small, quiet crew area so you don't have guests looking around and gawking at you, where they're gonna actually do the service. And they do have to do it when you're beyond 12 nautical miles from shore. And then typically after these ceremonies, the family receives a commemorative folder that shows the exact coordinates of the scattering of the ashes. Now, this came up recently, and John Heald brought it up publicly because a guest was recently furious because there was a limit on the number of people allowed at the ceremony. In this case, with Carnival, it's a 12-person limit. She called this limitation cruel and inhuman. And I understand the reaction, especially when you're grieving, you want your entire family present. But the space where they generally take you is genuinely small. Every guest has to be escorted to and from, usually, a restricted crew area for safety. And the logistics of managing more than 12 people in that setting just gets really unwieldy. Now, John Heald acknowledged that he should have been clear about that limitation earlier. And I think making it public was the right call. And I think John is really great at doing this kind of thing. And he takes so much heat all the time. You couldn't pay me enough to do this guy's job. So if you're ever considering a scattering of ashes at sea, the important thing to know is that there is this 12-person cap, at least with Carnival, and that the location may not be accessible also for guests with mobility challenges. So make sure you don't just plan the scattering of the ashes, but plan your group accordingly, because the ceremony itself is really handled with care and genuine respect, but there are some rules that unfortunately do apply. Now, a few other things happened this week that are worth a quick mention. If you've cruised to Costa Maya and you hit that wall of disgusting, stinky, slimy, smelly, brown, decomposing seaweed on the beach, it's called sargassum, you know it can ruin your Mexican beach day. I love Mexico, I love the Yucatan Peninsula, I love Costa Maya and Cozumel. Progreso, not so much. But man, I hate it there when the sargassum is really heavy. Now, Royal Caribbean did just announce a multi-year coastline protection plan for the area right next to where they're building out Perfect Day Mexico. The plan does include sargassum nets, skimming equipment, organized beach cleanups, and eventually an automated collection system to try to catch it before it reaches the shore. So kudos to Royal Caribbean for putting these measures in place. But if you travel to this region, you know it's like trying to brush your teeth while eating Oreo cookies. You can clean it up, it's just gonna keep washing to shore. So let's just say I have my doubts if these mitigation or removal efforts are actually going to be effective. And hopefully they are, because the end result would be cleaner beaches for both cruisers and the people who actually live there, because Royal Caribbean's development of this area has taken a lot of heat and gotten a lot of bad publicity by the locals that really protest and don't like what Royal Caribbean is building out here. And speaking of Royal Caribbean, if you got an email from them this week saying your stateroom occupancy was showing incorrectly in their system, here's the short version you need to know about. Nothing about your cabin is actually changing. Guests on Independence of the Seas and several other ships got the same notice, along with a warning that their booking would be unavailable on the app and the website for about a week while they ran this correction. Your room and amenities are supposed to stay exactly the same. It was just a back-end system fix, but it did freak a lot of people out because that email did trigger flashbacks to a previous situation where guests on another ship were actually reassigned to different, sometimes worse, staterooms, and that happened and people freaked out about it. So this was not that situation, but if your first reaction was panic, that's on Royal Caribbean, not you. They didn't do a really great job with communications here. And when the first thing that a customer reads in an official cruise line communication is your booking will be unavailable, instead of the assuring nothing about your cabin is gonna change, then you've turned a routine system update into an inbox crisis. Completely unnecessary. So yeah, Royal Caribbean, you really fumbled the ball on this one. Oh, and back to John Heald. Again, love this guy. He did have one more thing to say this week about something that I think is incredibly silly. Look, I don't begrudge many cruise traditions. Do what makes you happy, but this one I think is just dumb. Basically, John Heald said, you gotta stop dragging your bed out on the balcony. Specifically, he said it was absolutely bonkers the act of moving, dragging your mattress out on the balcony. And you know what? I gotta say, I agree with him. This started as a social media trend, people saying, oh my God, look, you can sleep with the ocean waves and the sky above you. And some of these viral videos have been from cruisers near Antarctica. So it's not just stupid, but it could potentially be dangerous. So yeah, these videos might go viral. These people might make these situations look dreamy, but it's just dumb. Don't do it. It's gross. Balconies are dirty. Nobody wants to be sleeping on a mattress that's been schlepped out onto a balcony, and it's a hazard. So just don't do it. Now, John Heel did say that it hasn't happened on a Carnival ship yet. Well, that's what you think. I guarantee you someone has done it. They just were smart enough not to post about it. But he is trying to get ahead of this trend. Now, if you want to sleep with fresh air, you can leave your balcony door open. Usually cruise lines are okay with that. Just know that the way a lot of staterooms are designed, that kills the AC. So you can end up getting really hot. You also do not want to open the actual door of your stateroom while that balcony is open, because it does this really awful vacuum effect that can create chaos and huge gusts of wind in your room. And also note that if you do try to move your mattress and you're specifically on a Carnival cruise, you could violate their code of conduct, which Carnival's really been cracking down on. And for people that violate the code of conduct, they can face fines of up to $500. So yeah, enjoy your cruise from the bed where it is. And as always, don't do dumb stuff when you're cruising. It's as simple as that.